Have you ever stopped and thought about how the whole idea of love has become like this big puzzle? You know,
Yeah.
we hear all this stuff about finding the one, like your soulmate is out there.
Right.
And then they tell us happily ever after is just like a swipe away on our phones.
Yeah.
But then in reality, more and more people are actually single and lonely, even though they've got all these dating apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a total head scratcher.
It really is.
So today
Yeah.
we're going to take a deep dive into this whole crisis of connection thing.
Okay.
And to do that, we're going to look at this NPR episode from Throughline called Modern Love.
Sounds good. I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, and it's super interesting because they bring in all these different voices and stuff.
Okay.
And they even talk to this philosopher, Slavoj Žižek. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, you got it.
Okay, good. He has this idea about modern love being love without the fall.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
What do you think about that?
Well, his argument is basically that these dating apps kind of let us go after the good parts of love,
Okay.
like companionship and intimacy and all that,
Mm-hmm.
without having to really be vulnerable, you know?
Yeah.
Like without risking getting your heart broken.
Oh, interesting.
It's almost like we're trying to make love this perfectly clean thing
I see.
and get all the pleasure out of it without any of the pain.
So you're saying we might be missing out on something important then?
It's possible, yeah.
Like that really raw, messy part of it?
Right.
The heartbreak that actually makes love so powerful in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so to figure out how we even got to this point, the episode goes all the way back
Okay.
to where modern romantic love kind of started.
Okay.
And believe it or not, this journey begins in the 1700s in Europe,
Wow, okay.
in a little German town called Jena.
Interesting.
So Jena was this super lively place back then,
Okay.
full of intellectuals and artists, all kinds of interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the heart of it all
Yeah.
was this amazing woman named Caroline Schlegel Schelling.
I've heard of her. She was a fascinating figure.
Yeah, she's a writer and a thinker,
Yeah.
way ahead of her time, seriously.
And a real trailblazer, too.
Yeah.
Defied all kinds of societal norms.
Oh, yeah, for sure. She even went to prison for her political beliefs.
Wow, that's right. I'd forgotten about that.
She was not afraid to stand up for what she believed in.
Not one bit.
But what makes Caroline and her whole crew really stand out
Right?
is this totally revolutionary idea they had about the self.
Right. That was huge.
So this was during a time of massive social change.
Uh-huh.
Like the French Revolution was happening.
Oh.
People were starting to question everything.
Right. Challenging the old ways.
And Caroline and her group, they were super inspired by this whole idea of individual freedom.
Yeah, makes sense.
Like they believed every person had the right to decide who they were
Interesting.
and to make choices based on their own values,
Okay.
not just on what society told them to do.
So instead of being defined by their roles, like as a wife or a daughter,
Exactly.
they were saying, we get to decide who we are.
Yeah, exactly. Like it was this huge shift in thinking.
It was like a complete 180.
And this radical concept of the self became like the foundation for the whole romantic movement.
It makes you wonder how much of that still influences us today.
It's true.
Like it's a far cry from those fairy tale romances we see all the time, you know?
Yeah, totally different. But how did we go from this idea of love as liberation
Right?
to those happily ever after stories that are everywhere these days?
Well, that's where the media comes in.
Okay.
The episode talks about how over time, this idea of romantic love got shaped by different kinds of stories.
Okay.
From Shakespeare's sonnets to Disney movies to all those rom-coms we watch.
So you're saying it's not just about the big romantic gestures and stuff.
Right.
It's about the message underneath those stories.
Exactly. Like the idea that love always wins in the end.
Uh-huh.
That everyone has one perfect soulmate out there. And that love at first sight is like the ultimate goal.
Yeah. We're basically bombarded with those ideas from the time we're kids.
We are. And it totally shapes our expectations about love.
And speaking of shaping expectations,
Yeah.
the episode talks to this expert, Dr. Veronica Hefner.
Okay.
She studies how these romantic ideals in the media affect us psychologically.
Interesting. What'd she find?
Her research actually shows that people who put these idealized notions into their dating profiles,
Okay.
talking about finding their soulmate or wanting to
yeah.
be perfect and all that,
Yeah.
those people are actually seen as more attractive.
Wow. That's wild.
Isn't that crazy? And especially by people who consume a lot of romantic media.
No kidding. So we're basically internalizing those media portrayals
Yeah.
and then projecting them onto our own search for love.
Exactly. It's like we're trying to fit ourselves into some pre-made mold
Right.
instead of just being ourselves and seeing the real messy beauty of connection.
Yeah, trying to force ourselves into a square hole when we're round pegs.
Exactly. And I think that sets us up perfectly to talk about modern dating,
Makes sense.
where apps like Tinder and Bumble are king.
It's a whole different ball game now.
It really is. But before we jump into that world of swiping and algorithms,
Okay.
the episode takes us on this kind of surprising journey through the history of dating itself.
Oh, interesting. I'm all ears.
It turns out dating as we know it
Yeah.
wasn't always so simple.
Really? Like how?
Like back in the late 1800s and early 1900s,
Okay.
just the idea of dating was seen as scandalous.
You're kidding.
No, seriously, women who went on dates could get in trouble with the police.
Wow, I had no idea.
They would be accused of being immoral and all sorts of things.
Times have definitely changed. But it seems like every generation has its own hang-ups about dating, right?
Yeah, you're right. The episode points out that there's always been this kind of moral panic around it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, what's the right way to date? Always changing.
Exactly. So in the early 1900s, it was about women being independent
Uh-huh.
and this fear that they would go astray or whatever.
Right.
Then in the 1950s, people freaked out about going steady
Oh, yeah.
and teenagers having too much freedom.
Like, every generation has their own version of the dating scare.
Exactly.
And it's fascinating how the episode connects this moral panic to, well, consumerism.
Oh, interesting. How so?
As dating became more about spending money, dinners, movies, all that,
Yeah.
it made people anxious about young folks' values and what they were choosing. Makes sense.
It's like dating became this product tied up with all the economic stuff happening around us.
Wow, I never thought about it like that. So from the very beginning, dating has been shaped by society and economics,
It has.
constantly changing along with the world.
Right. And it seems like with these dating apps, we've entered a whole new level of complexity.
Totally. It's like a whole new era, and maybe even a new era of disillusionment.
You think so?
Maybe. That's what we'll look at next. Okay, I'm ready. Let's dive in. It's quite a journey we've been on.
It is.
From those secret meetups in the 1900s
Right.
to the pressure to spend money on dates in the 50s.
Yeah.
And now we're in this digital age with
Yeah.
all these dating apps.
Yeah.
And this NPR episode does a great job of showing the whole experience, the
Yeah.
excitement, the hope, the frustration.
Yeah, it really is like a roller coaster of emotions.
It is.
You have all that anticipation in the beginning,
Right.
that thrill when you match with someone interesting, but then it just fizzles out.
So often.
Yeah, you get stuck in this loop,
Yeah.
swiping, chatting, maybe a few dates,
Right.
but nothing that really lasts.
It's tough.
Yeah.
And the episode talks to this woman named Emma,
Okay.
who used apps for years.
Okay.
And she describes it so well.
What did she say?
All the ups and downs, and then
Yeah.
finally just feeling burned out.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting because she's queer,
Okay.
and she talks about how at first the apps felt liberating, like a safe place to explore her identity and
Right.
connect with others.
Okay.
But even with that, she eventually hit a wall.
Wow. So even for her, it was too much.
Yeah, she felt disillusioned by the whole thing.
So her story kind of highlights this idea
Yeah,
that even though apps are supposed to connect us,
right.
they can actually make us feel more isolated.
It's true.
It seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
How can something designed to bring people together
Yeah.
end up making us feel more alone?
Well, Weigel, the historian,
Yes.
uses this term disembedding.
Disembedding.
And it basically means that in the past,
Okay.
even if you met someone at a bar or a party, there was usually some shared social context.
Right, like mutual friends.
Exactly.
Or being part of the same social circle.
Yeah, a sense of connection already.
Okay.
But with these apps,
Yeah.
it's just two profiles in this digital void.
Interesting.
No shared history.
Right.
No mutual connections.
It's just based on looks?
Pretty much. And
Yeah.
that can create this feeling of detachment. You're constantly judging profiles
Yeah.
based on this limited information.
Right.
And it always feels like there's something better out there.
I like that saying, the grass is always greener.
Exactly.
Or in this case.
On the next profile.
Exactly.
And Weigel also talks about the business side of it.
Okay.
For these apps to make money,
Yeah.
they need to keep people using them.
Right.
And that means encouraging people to keep swiping.
So they're designed to keep us hooked.
In a way, yeah.
Interesting.
It's like the design itself might actually be working against finding a real connection.
I see what you mean.
And get this, she interviewed a Harvard Business School professor
Okay.
and a sex worker.
Wow. Okay, that's a range.
It is. And they both agreed that algorithms are terrible at predicting lasting romantic compatibility.
That's so interesting because you would think with all that data, the algorithms could find your perfect match.
Right, your preferences, your interests.
Yeah, your swiping patterns, all that.
All of it.
But it sounds like human connection is just too complex.
Way too complex.
For an algorithm to understand.
It can't be reduced to data points.
Exactly.
We're still wired for those gut feelings.
Right.
That spark that an algorithm can't replicate.
So where does that leave us?
Good question.
Are we doomed to just keep swiping forever?
Oh.
So we've been through a lot, haven't we?
We have.
From these big ideas about love to the worries of different generations and now the crazy world of dating apps.
Yeah.
It's like we've been lost in this maze of love.
I like that analogy.
So is there a way out? What happens next?
Well, the episode doesn't say it has all the answers,
Okay.
but it does offer some hope,
Okay, good. I need some hope.
Like, remember Emma?
Yeah, the woman who ditched the apps.
Yes, she said she felt this huge sense of relief.
Really?
Like a weight had been lifted.
Wow.
And she started seeing the world differently.
Like how?
Noticing more chances for connection in her everyday life.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So she's saying we should all just quit dating apps?
Not necessarily. It's more about changing your perspective.
Okay.
Making a choice to take control.
I see.
Instead of letting algorithms decide for us.
Right.
Maybe we need to rediscover serendipity.
Serendipity, okay.
Those random encounters that lead to real connection.
That sounds kind of romantic.
It does, doesn't it?
So putting down our phones and engaging with the world more.
Exactly, like striking up a conversation with someone at a coffee shop.
Okay.
Or joining a club or something.
Mm-hmm.
Just being more present and open in our daily lives.
It's like creating those moments where magic can happen.
That's a great way to put it.
So being more proactive.
Right.
Writing our own love stories.
Instead of letting an algorithm write it for us.
Yeah.
And remember, love always involves some risk, right?
True. You can't control who you fall for.
You can't.
Or how it'll all turn out.
Nope. And maybe that's what makes it so exciting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Embracing the unknown.
Being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Trusting that even if we don't find the one,
Right.
the journey itself can be amazing.
I agree.
Love isn't a destination.
It's not.
It's a journey.
With twists and turns.
An unexpected detour.
And we get to choose our own path.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
It is.
And you know what? The episode actually ends on a really hopeful note.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. The host says that after learning all about modern love, he feels optimistic about the future of dating.
Well, that's encouraging.
It reminds us that even with all the challenges,
Yeah.
there's still a reason to believe in connection.
It all comes back to that.
Yeah, maybe that's the biggest takeaway here.
Okay.
Love might be a puzzle,
It is.
but it's one worth solving.
Totally.
And maybe the best way to go about it
Yeah.
is to embrace the messiness,
The ups and downs.
the uncertainty,
And the joy of it
the
all.
whole crazy journey.
Absolutely.
Well, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the future of dating?
How do you deal with finding love in this digital age?
Share your experiences and thoughts in a review.
Let's keep this conversation going.
And thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
See you next time.